Close your eyes for a moment and imagine money without numbers. No bills, no balances, no accounts, just the feeling it gives you. Does it feel heavy or light? Does it feel distant or familiar? Does it feel like safety or pressure? Most people believe money is something we earn, something we manage, something we spend. But rarely do we ask a quieter question. Who are you when money enters the room? Because money does not arrive as a blank object. It arrives carrying your past, your memories, your fears, your expectations. It arrives carrying a story that began long before your first paycheck, long before your first debt, long before your first investment. A story that was whispered to you at dinner tables, implied through silence, learned through observation rather than instruction, and slowly, without your awareness, that story became your financial life. Tonight, we explore something deeper than budgeting, deeper than investing strategies, deeper than income. We explore identity, because money does not change who you are. It reveals who you believe yourself to be. So, let this play in the background. Let it move slowly. Let it meet you where you are. This is not about fixing money. This is about understanding the self that money obeys. Money feels modern, but the psychology behind it is ancient. Long before banks, humans survived through exchange, trust, reputation, belonging. Who you were in the group determined what you received, and although currencies changed, that emotional system never left us. Today, money still speaks to the same part of the mind, the part that asks, am I safe? Am I enough? Do I belong? This is why two people with the same income live entirely different financial lives. One feels calm with little, the other feels anxious with abundance. Because money is filtered through identity. Your identity is the silent narrator behind every financial decision. It decides what feels possible, what feels dangerous, what feels not for people like me. And most of the time, it operates quietly, invisible, untested, unquestioned, until one day you wonder, why do I keep repeating the same financial patterns, even when I know better? The answer is not lack of information. It is loyalty to a story. Every human being lives inside a story, not a fictional one, a psychological one, a story about who they are, what life expects from them, what outcomes feel realistic. Money simply follows that script. The first chapter, early impressions. Your financial identity began forming before you had words for it. You watched how adults reacted to bills, to expenses, to loss, to abundance. You felt the mood shift when money was mentioned. You noticed whether it brought arguments, or calm, or silence, and without knowing it, you absorbed rules. Rules like, money causes stress, money disappears quickly. People like us don't get rich. Security comes from saving everything. Spending is freedom. Money is power. Money is shame. These rules weren't taught, they were felt. And feelings shape behavior far more than logic ever could. So when you face money today, you are not alone. You are accompanied by every past emotional imprint. Identity is not who you are. It's who you protect. Your identity is not truth. It is protection. It protects you from uncertainty, from rejection, from disappointment. If your story says, I'm not good with money, then failing financially hurts less. If your story says, I value freedom, not wealth, then avoiding responsibility feels noble. If your story says, rich people are greedy, then staying poor preserves moral comfort. None of these stories are conscious lies. They are emotional shields, and money respects them, because money does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you believe is safe to become. Why income doesn't change identity. This is why sudden money rarely creates lasting wealth. Without a new identity, money feels foreign, temporary, unstable. The mind tries to return to familiar territory. Spending increases. Risks become impulsive. Opportunities are avoided. Because abundance without identity feels like standing on thin ice. So the system corrects back to the known self, back to the familiar story, the roles we play with money. Some people unconsciously adopt roles: the saver, the provider, the escaper, the risk-taker, the caretaker, the martyr. Each role carries emotional rewards. Saving brings control. Spending brings relief. Risk brings excitement. Giving brings validation. And as long as the emotional reward remains, the role persists. Money becomes a stage where identity performs, not a tool, a mirror, time, identity, and patience. Identity determines your relationship with time. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you focus on short-term relief. If you see yourself as someone who builds, you tolerate delay. Wealth is rarely about intelligence. It is about the ability to sit quietly with discomfort, while time compounds unseen. And only certain identities can tolerate waiting. There is something subtle that happens when identity and money meet over long periods of time. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, through repetition. Every small decision reinforces a belief. Every avoided action confirms a story. Every impulsive choice strengthens a pattern. And slowly, life begins to look exactly the way the identity expects it to look. This is why people often say, "I've always been like this with money," as if money behavior were a personality trait. But it isn't. It's a narrative habit, a practiced way of responding to uncertainty. Money decisions are rarely about money itself. They are about self-consistency. The mind prefers internal coherence over external success. If your identity says, "I struggle," then succeeding too much creates tension. If your identity says, "I am cautious," then bold opportunities feel reckless, even when they're rational. So the mind gently nudges you back into alignment, not to punish you, but to preserve who you believe you are. This is why awareness feels unsettling, because it introduces a question the identity cannot answer easily. What if this story is optional? Think about how people speak about money when they are alone, not in public, not in advice-giving mode, but in private. The language changes. There is resignation, defensiveness, sometimes humor masking disappointment. Phrases like, "That's just how life is," "Money isn't everything," "I'm not meant for that kind of success." These phrases are not observations, they are anchors. They keep identity stable, because stability feels safer than possibility. There is also an invisible boundary most people never cross, a financial ceiling that feels emotionally comfortable. Below it, they feel motivated. Above it, they feel exposed. So when life offers a chance to move beyond that ceiling, something interferes. Procrastination, self-doubt, sudden disinterest. Not because the opportunity is wrong, but because the identity is unprepared. Money begins to ask new questions. Questions like, who are you when you no longer need to struggle? How do you relate to people when survival is no longer the bond? What do you believe about yourself when excuses disappear? These questions feel heavier than risk. So many people unconsciously retreat back to the familiar self. This is why financial growth often requires emotional discomfort before financial improvement, because you are not just changing numbers, you are renegotiating who you are allowed to be. And identity resists renegotiation. It has kept you alive, protected you, given meaning to your past. Letting go feels like betrayal, even when the future is kinder. Another quiet force at work is comparison, but not the obvious kind. Not envy of luxury or status. The deeper comparison is identity-based. You don't compare money, you compare belonging. You notice who feels like you and who feels distant, and you unconsciously calibrate your financial behavior to stay aligned with your reference group. Spending patterns, risk tolerance, ambition, all adjusted to avoid standing out too much. Because standing out risks separation, and the human nervous system values belonging more than wealth. This is ancient wiring. Money hasn't changed it. This is why some people self-sabotage right after progress. A raise arrives, and expenses grow. A breakthrough happens, and focus fades, not because they are careless, but because they are rebalancing identity, returning to emotional equilibrium. Wealth without belonging feels lonely, so the mind chooses familiarity. There is also the idea of deservedness, a belief rarely spoken aloud. Some people feel money must be earned through suffering. Others feel it must arrive through luck. Some feel it must be justified. Some feel it must be hidden. Deservedness shapes how long money is allowed to stay. If wealth feels undeserved, the mind looks for ways to release it. Quick spending, overgiving, bad investments. Balance is restored, not financially, emotionally. Even long-term planning is identity-based. Planning assumes continuity of self. It assumes you believe you will still exist, still matter, still be capable. Years from now, people who don't feel anchored in their future self struggle to invest patiently. Why save for someone you don't trust will arrive? Why build for a self you haven't befriended? So money stays present-focused, used to regulate emotion rather than build time. This is where patience becomes more than a virtue. It becomes an identity shift. Patience says, I am someone who remains. I trust continuity. I don't need immediate proof to feel safe. These are not financial skills. They are existential beliefs, and money flows differently around them. Notice how calm, wealthy people often speak, not excited, not urgent, because urgency belongs to survival identity. Calm belongs to continuity identity, and money mirrors that calm. Slowly, predictably, quietly. When identity changes, behavior follows effortlessly. No force required, no discipline battles. Decisions feel obvious instead of difficult, because the internal narrator has changed tone. Money no longer argues, it cooperates. And this is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to use money to become someone, you finally become someone money can stay with. At some point, every person faces a choice, not a financial one, an identity one, to continue reinforcing the familiar story, or to sit with the discomfort of a quieter, more expansive self, a self that doesn't need chaos to feel alive, a self that doesn't need struggle to feel worthy, a self that allows money to exist without emotional charge. That choice is rarely loud. It happens in silence, in pauses, in moments where you don't react the old way. And over time, those pauses compound, just like money does. Identity feels permanent, but it is not. It is simply familiar, and familiarity feels safe. Change begins not with action, but with observation, watching your reactions without judgment, noticing the stories that appear when money is involved, asking gently, who is this protecting? What does this belief keep me safe from? What would feel uncomfortable if this story dissolved? Growth feels like loss at first. Loss of certainty, loss of self-image, loss of old explanations. But beyond that loss, there is space. Space to choose differently. Space to relate to money without fear. Space to become someone who sees money not as identity, but as expression. Expression of values, of patience, of care. When identity loosens, money softens, and decisions become quieter, cleaner, less emotional. Money is not your enemy. It is not your savior. It is a listener. It listens to the stories you repeat in silence. Change the story, and money follows. Not immediately, not dramatically, but patiently, like time, like growth, like trust. So the next time money triggers emotion, pause, listen, not to the numbers, but to the narrator inside you. Because in the end, true wealth is not counted. It is felt in the calm that arrives, when your identity no longer needs money to prove its worth. If you enjoy calm reflections about wealth, identity, and human behavior, subscribe to Quiet Money, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, move slowly, think deeply, and let money become quieter.